Part 49. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 482. After working secretly for half a month, Viper Arezzo discovered for the first time that Gretel's schedule had changed. He didn't come to the medical clinic today. Mr. Viper has been snooping around the medical center for 5 days in a row. Pretend to be a rich man, a servant running errands and delivering goods, a poor patient, a beggar, ride a carriage, walk, squatting opposite with a broken bowl. After 5 consecutive days of observation, he came to a conclusion. Around 8 o'clock, Gretel always rides his silver moon deer all the way to the door in a cloud of dust, and starts working in high spirits. It's sunny, cloudy, windy, or rainy, all without exception, and the time difference is less than 5 minutes. It's exactly like praying in church. Mr. Viper didn't understand. The medical clinic was obviously for him and no one was looking after him. Why did he come so early every day? If Greet hears his question, he will definitely answer it. In his previous life, he clocked in at the hospital and was used to it. There are a lot of patients in the emergency department 24 hours a day. If one person is late, colleagues have to shoulder an extra burden, so everyone can try not to be late. But Greet didn't come today. Where have you gone? Mr. Viper squatted diagonally across from the medical center holding the broken bowl. He was blown by the cold wind and sneezed 7 or 8 times in a row before he was 100% sure. Greet really changed his schedule today. Where have you been? Gretel was taken to the White Tower again. In the conference room on the 5th floor, there was a full table of people sitting around a long oval table. There were thick piles of newspapers, leaflets, and slips of paper at every location. Jury member, Archmage Grom of Black Crow Swamp, sat at the top with a solemn expression. The issue of universal smallpox vaccination has encountered a lot of resistance. I invite everyone here today to communicate the situation internally and discuss how to implement it. Greet remained silent and turned over the documents first. At the top of the paper pile, the one with the largest area and the strongest visual impact is a tabloid, with a line of bold characters on the top. Turn people into cows. As expected, the worries of a foolish man and a foolish woman are similar. Gretel curled his lips and looked below the title. Next to the title is a caricature of a person with exaggerated body language and grotesque faces. Bull heads, bull noses, horns, everything. Even if the tabloid is shoddy and the printing quality is worrisome, it cannot hide the vivid brushwork of the artist. Especially the expression on the cow's face, which is deformed without knowing it, and full of arrogance, is really lifelike. Gretel burst out laughing. Across the long table, the Minister of Emergency Management, Master Colin, covered half of his face with a newspaper and glared at him covertly. You are the one who caused cowpox, and you still laugh. Where did this thing come from? Can it be banned? Archmage Grom's face was gloomy. Master Colin raised his head, but before he could speak, Gretel had already spoken before him. It can't be banned. As long as anything is officially banned, it will definitely spread faster. That's right. Next to Minister Colin, a lean little mage with a rat's beard said quietly. Our intelligence department is also responsible for monitoring public opinion. In recent times, citizens' views on the smallpox vaccine have rapidly turned negative, and it is suspected that someone is behind it. No need to be suspicious, there must be someone, more than one or two, another City Hall official said with a black face. In the past week, the number of citizens taking the initiative to vaccinate against cowpox has dropped by 50% compared to the previous week. My people have heard some concerns in various chambers of commerce and taverns, saying that the Parliament will impose a large amount of taxes. A businessman is inquiring about the situation and preparing to transfer property. Officials and clerks were busy providing information. There is no other way. The county magistrate might as well take charge now. In front of a great magician of the necromancy department, he has to pretend to be more indignant. And it is said that this year's bonus is linked to the number of vaccinations. Archmage Grom listened to their complaints in silence. After listening for about a quarter of an hour, I picked up the coffee spoon and tapped the rim of the cup. How is the situation now? In addition to vaccinations by the army, city guards, colleges, and other organizations, citizens have voluntarily vaccinated 7,728 vaccines. The funds raised, not counting the parliamentary contribution points, total 15,275 gold coins. Someone immediately answered. The original plan was to start promoting vaccination at 1 silver coin per person early next month, and at the same time, launch compulsory vaccination for all. But now, there is still a gap of more than half of the funds, and people's resistance is also very high. Sir, do we really want to vaccinate the entire population? Yes, this question caused a cloud of questions in the conference room. People are relying on the law but not blaming everyone. From the operators of the emergency management department to the civilian clerks of the city hall, everyone is chirping. Those people don't want to be vaccinated, just let them go. Anyway, getting smallpox is their own business. This is purely indifferent, since you and your family are already safe anyway. And those poor people, even if they don't die from smallpox, they will die from other things. Is it worth the parliament passing a law to force them out and inoculate them? This person is a front-line operator and knows how terrible the workload is. Even if you want to sell vaccines, if you sell so much, you should make enough money, right? Those poor people can't save 5 coppers a month, so there's no point in exploiting them. This is probably because he is not very popular. He doesn't know who the inventor of cowpox is, or doesn't know that Greet was present, so he pointed at the monk and called him bald. Gretel stared straight ahead with blank eyes, pretending not to hear. Unexpectedly, Archmage Grom did not let him go and directly named him. Master Nordmark, do you think it is necessary for all people to be vaccinated against smallpox? If you can do it, of course you should take it all, Gretel blurted out. There was a sudden silence in the conference room, and then a rough voice sounded through the door. I'll take it all. That's easy to say. Why are you here so early? Archmage Grom stood up helplessly. As soon as he moved, people in the conference room stood up. Gretel turned his head along with the crowd. I saw the heavy wooden door of the conference room burst open, and a big man with a height of over 1.8 meters and a weight of over 180 centimeters, with broad arms and round waist, strode in. If I don't come back, the city of Nevis will be turned upside down by you. My lord the Earl of Argyll. My lord the Earl of Argyll. In the conference room, the clerks in the city hall saluted unevenly. Gretel also bowed his head. The Earl of Argyll was one of the most powerful lords near Nevis. He and the Earl of Inverness were in the south and north, sandwiching the city of Nevis in the middle. It is said that the city of Nevis once belonged to the Earl of Argyll 1,000 years ago and was later given to the Parliament for use. The original document was given as a gift and is still kept in the Tower of Babel. The Count himself cannot be ignored. Gretel heard from Archmage Carlyle that the current Earl of Argyll is a 15th level high-level knight who wields the inherited weapon Golden Flame Sword. In a short time, he can compete with the 18th level Archmage. In the previous battle with the glorious Holy See, the Earl of Argyll also led an army and went out with the Parliament. The relationship between the two parties is quite close. It was because of our closeness that we were able to come over directly and participate in the meeting directly. The big man nodded, walked through them as if no one else was around, walked directly to the other end of the long oval table, and stood opposite Archmage Grom. As soon as he pressed the table, the heavy beechwood table almost turned over when he pressed it. How many people die from smallpox in a year? Is it worth such a big fight? This is not a matter of how many people die, but a matter of competing with the glory Holy See for the right to speak. It is a direct order from the legendary mage. Archmage Grom's words were on his lips, but it was difficult to say them directly in front of a room full of people. Just as he was about to tell everyone to leave, a clear voice suddenly sounded in the conference room. Based on death statistics for the past 20 years, in 1163, 278 people died from smallpox. In 1167, 327 people died. In years without a pandemic, the average number of deaths was around 300. In a pandemic year, such as 1170, 5,738 people died. Who are you? The Earl's gaze shot towards him like a hawk. He has a tall build, a resolute face, and a pair of piercing eyes that are very oppressive when he looks over. Just looking back, the two young mages beside Gretel subconsciously took a step back. Greet was completely unmoved. He lowered his eyes, bowed slightly politely, and spoke calmly. Gretel Nordmark. I salute you, Your Excellency. Are you the one who invented cowpox? The Earl of Argyll looked at Gretel with a stern look. Seeing that Gretel was not moved at all, he snorted and softened his tone slightly. You are someone who has done your homework. So, for 300 people a year, are you going to turn over the entire Nevis? Then in the future, for cholera, typhoid, scarlet fever, and so many plagues, are you going to do it again? How many times have you turned the city over? When these words came out, everyone in the conference room stared at Greet from all directions. Archmage Grom frowned and wanted to explain a few things to Gretel. For example, the promotion plan was not decided by the little guy. After thinking about it, he waved to everyone in the room. You guys go out first. Everyone in the meeting left with a roar. Archmage Grom asked Earl Argyll to sit down and pressed his palms to Gretel. You also sit down and speak slowly. Salah, little Greet almost only got back his money in this incident and made nothing at all. He did not develop cowpox for his own personal gain. That's not the reason for such a commotion. Confronted in private, Earl Argyll's attitude softened a lot and he sighed deeply. I saw something wasn't right outside, and I felt like someone was causing trouble, so I came here specially. Then again, you guys were too impatient. Before he finished his sentence, the noise outside grew from small to loud, and kept getting closer. After a while, Minister Colin from the Emergency Management Department knocked on the door. Without waiting for an answer, he hurriedly opened the door and came in. Urgent report, some poor people were incited to attack Greet's hospital. Got another update. There are only 13 left, blah blah blah. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. There is so little about everything these days, I feel like you don't love me anymore. Thanks to Atkihazuyi for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 483. Since someone vandalized Greet's hospital, the meeting would naturally not be able to continue. Gretel immediately said goodbye and returned. Archmage Grom thought for a while and announced the adjournment of the meeting. He followed over to have a look. No matter how he is the little guy named by His Excellency the Immortal to take care of him, he still needs to pay more attention to him. They dare to smash up the medical center, what can't those people dare to do? Well, in his long life, he had seen people blocking the entrance of the temple and throwing stones more than once. This is the first time I've seen a magician's medical clinic being smashed. Why, do you think magicians can't kill people? It's not the magician's job to treat you. It's not like the people from the temple, who in name only have to act like mercy, compassion, and taking care of believers on behalf of God. Archmage Graham arranged the progress of the subsequent meeting, exchanged greetings with Earl of Argyll, and wandered downstairs. When I stood at the gate of the White Tower, I saw a white shadow with billowing smoke and dust rushing into the wilderness. Gretel didn't wait for anyone, and let Bernard lift him onto the deer's back, and flew away quickly. Really, what's the rush? Archmage Graham shook his head and cast a spell to summon a phantom pony. Next to him, a law enforcement team from the emergency management department, 2 magicians and 5 knights were ready to go. The team spread out, protecting the archmage in the middle, and hurried away. The speed of ordinary war horses is certainly not as fast as that of the 8th level magical beast Silver Moon Deer. Greed took the lead and rushed back to the hospital at lightning speed. As soon as he stepped onto the street in front of the hospital and looked from a distance, his face sank. The entrance to the hospital was covered in darkness with heads. The entire street, which is at least as wide as 2-way 4 lanes, is tightly blocked, from 50 or 60 meters from the left to 50 or 60 meters on the right. The crowd was rubbing their shoulders one after another, their chests were pressed against their backs, and they were shouting in confusion. Kill the devil healer! Death to the black-hearted healers! Extract our hard-earned money! And you want to turn us into cows? Smash it here! Smash it! While shouting, they pushed and shoved their way in. That look, if you add corpses, circles, and people wearing mourning clothes and crying, it would definitely be a large-scale medical incident. Where is the security guard? Where are the police? Barbarian security guards stood in a row at the entrance of the 3-story building. The barbarian nurses recruited by Cyrilla didn't even change into their nurse uniforms before they rushed out and joined the security guards in their battle sequence. The average height of the barbarians is more than 2 meters. Facing the poor human beings who are less than 1.7 meters tall, just standing there is like an iron wall. Greet breathed a sigh of relief. Not bad, not bad, at least the hospital's defense strength is sufficient for now. At the other end of the street, the city guards under the city hall had arrived and were blowing whistles there, trying to prevent more people from approaching. As for the crowd that has gathered, they seem to have no choice but to rely on the hospital. The barbarians probably didn't get the order to attack. They just held up shields higher than their heads and formed a shield wall to keep the attackers away. That shield looks familiar? Greet squinted his eyes and took a closer look, and found that it was a long wooden board half a foot wide, nailed into a square frame, the bedboard of the treatment bed. Okay, to deal with these poor people, kite shields, square shields, and tower shields are really not as effective as bedboards. Gretel just breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the rioters waving their arms, banging, 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 and throwing various throwing weapons in a mess. On the bedboard and on the hospital wall, there were stains left one after another. Mud, dirt, horse manure, dog feces. It is impossible to have rotten leaves and vegetables, and rotten eggs and rotten tomatoes will not appear. We still have to keep them to eat. Even if it stinks and rots, it can still be enough to satisfy the hunger, and it is impossible to throw it out. I go. Gretel blurted out. Dirty my medical bed. Dirty my hospital. Throwing this out, how much effort will I have to spend cleaning it? The research work has been suspended at least halfway, and all the mage apprentices must be freed up to throw cleaning skills. Gretel was furious. The Silver Moon Deer under the seat also felt the anger of its master. As soon as he lowered his head, he was about to rush towards the crowd, ungrateful humans. Charge directly and trample a wave of them to disperse them. Da-da-da, the deer's hooves touched the ground and dug 3 times. Silver Moon Deer's 4 legs were slightly bent, and he lowered his head to gain momentum. Opposite the hospital, Viper Arezzo, squatting at the foot of the wall in rags, his eyes quietly lit up. Good chance. What a great opportunity. Just wondering how to get close to the target, he actually rushed into the crowd by himself. While the crowd was being trampled by the impact, chaos broke out in an instant, and he just happened to get close with a knife. Stop fighting. The therapists here are good people. Mr. Viper shouted at the volume of an ordinary person, which was almost lost in the crowd, threw down the broken bowl and jumped into the crowd. One turn to the left, one to the right, 3 turns and 2 turns, and it has slipped into the center of the crowd like a fish. Drill deeper, squat down, and let others cover you to avoid being noticed by the target. Ouch! Don't hit me. The therapist here is a good person. What a good person. In the distance, the sound of Silver Moon Deer's hooves hitting the ground is getting closer and louder. Hey, why can't you come over? Appa. Appa, stop. Appa, don't want it. Mr. Viper did not have clairvoyance in the crowd and could not see the outside scene. In fact, the Silver Moon Deer had just lowered its head and charged, and Gretel quickly pounced forward, hugged the deer's neck, and strenuously pulled back. These people are not guilty enough to die. He was scolded, ordered to clean the floor, and imprisoned for a few days at most. This was already the most severe punishment. Besides, with the city guards here, the White Tower was also alerted, and the Parliament's law enforcement team was probably coming soon. Maintain order at the scene and let the officials arrest people. Don't do it yourself. Gretel's arm strength is almost 0 for an 8th level monster. Fortunately, the Silver Moon Deer gave its owner face in the end, exhaling 2 streams of hot air from its nostrils, slowly slowing down, and stopped not far in front of the crowd. Well, the master is too kind, so what if a few of these bad guys are trampled to death? Facing the direction in which the giant deer was running, the crowd shrank slightly, then pushed forward when they saw Appa stop. More than one voice shouted, "That's him. That's the man riding the deer. He's the one who defrauded us of our money. Beat him to death." With a loud bang, the crowd at the entrance of the hospital turned collectively and looked at Greet in a dark way. Gretel was shocked and quickly patted the Silver Moon Deer's neck. "Appa. Let's turn around. Go back through the back door." Silver Moon Deer turned suddenly. The antlers more than 3 meters wide drew 2 huge arcs, forcing back the trouble-making poor people who were closest to them. With the sound of hoofbeats, they turned around and ran away. "Mr. Viper? Don't run. What should I do if you run away? They're all so close. I never thought you were such a magician." Faced with the poor people who smashed your hospital, what you thought of was not to take action but to escape. If you change to a mage, the fireball spell will come out. He was stunned for a moment, then quickly backed away, trying to leave the crowd without leaving a trace. Not far away from the hospital entrance, the shield wall of the barbarian security guard suddenly cracked, and a clear male voice raised up. "Put." There was no clang of bowstrings, no clang of trebuchets, no whirring of slings. There was only the sound of the scroll being suddenly torn apart, and the sudden high pitch of the chant. Immediately afterwards, Viper Arezzo felt a chill that instantly penetrated his whole body. Fear. Great horror. As if walking alone in the dark night, a ghost blows on the back of the neck with cold air. It's like fighting someone on the battlefield, watching the steel knife come towards your face with blood. Like a young child hiding under the bed, listening to the continuous screams of his parents and family, watching the blood slowly flowing to the bottom of the bed. Arezzo swayed and barely steadied himself. However, in front of me, behind me, to the left and to the right of me, the poor people who were shouting and beating me just now were screaming loudly and running like headless chickens. Terror spell. It's a first-level necromantic magic, panic. In an instant, great fear is instilled in the heart of the subject, causing him to lose his mind and start running away. This magic can effectively tear apart the opponent's formation when fighting one-on-one or in a small group. However, in a crowded environment, it has an additional effect. When 3, 5, or a dozen people in a dense crowd start running wildly, it is very easy to cause a stampede. Viper Arezzo was stepped on 5 or 6 times in an instant. Wails and screams were heard from behind, left and right, and some weak people were already being pushed to the ground. In the distance, he heard the deer's hooves and quickly turned back. The young mage on the deer's back shouted loudly. Dispel! Dispel the magic effect! Soothe them! This will cause trouble. People will die. Hurry! It is easy to dispel but difficult to appease. Whether it is a panic spell or a fear spell, the duration is not long. Even if it is not deliberately dispelled, it only takes a few seconds. However, it is not that easy to calm down the already angry crowd. The necromancer and the necromancer apprentices retreated quietly. Behind the shield wall, there was a jumble of footsteps. The priest took over and began to work hard to release spells such as blessing and inspiration. Even the barbarian security guards, under an order, put down their shields and rushed into the crowd, trying to separate the scurrying people as much as possible. However, fear is contagious. When he used the panic technique, only one person was hit, but when he screamed and ran away, and stepped on a few more people, the number of people affected instantly became 3, 5, or 10. After Gretel finished shouting, when the priests came forward, fear had snowballed. In an instant, everyone was shouting and running. Greet looked down from a high position and saw 3 or 5 people fell down in an instant. Something big is going to happen. Help! Help! He used a loudspeaker to shout to the hospital. While shouting, he thought quickly. How to stop them? How to stop these people from running around? Group therapy? No, groups remove fear? Can't do it. Quicksand technique? Grease technique? Got it? Gretel's eyes lit up. He quickly patted the space bag, took out a small ball of soft spider web, and pointed in front. Spider web technique. Tough, sticky, and densely packed spider webs filled the entire street in an instant. Whether they were poor people running wildly or poor people being trampled by the crowd and almost falling to the ground, they were all firmly stuck in the spider web and unable to move. I see you are still running. Spider web technique is the #1 weapon to prevent stampedes. Gretel clapped his hands in satisfaction. The barbarians began to rush in and drag people away, carrying the door panels and first picking up those who had fallen to the ground and carrying them to the hospital. The city guards who were watching from a distance blew their whistles and stepped forward to negotiate, preparing to help. Gretel raised his hand to stop. Wait a minute. It seems like someone is injured. Let me take a look first and treat those who are life-threatening. Huh? Want to treat people? Viper Arezzo's heart moved, and he lay peacefully in the spider web technique, hugging his stomach, and groaned loudly. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 484. Viper Arezzo hugged his belly and lay among the cobwebs, pretending to moan. While groaning, he glanced secretly. There was a vast white cobweb all around. Under the hood, tough and sticky spiderwebs almost covered the entire street. Every one of the people who came to make trouble at the entrance of the medical center was glued to the point of being unable to move. The barbarian guards who had just formed a human wall, and another group of barbarians wearing very eye-catching white clothes, moved 1 foot high and 1 foot low in the spider web. Pull out a wounded person and hand it over to the priest outside, pull out another wounded person, pass it from hand to hand, and hand it over to the priest outside. He's actually quite kind, tisk. Mr. Arezzo flicked the roof of his mouth with his tongue. Someone came to the door to make trouble, and you are still thinking about saving people. How merciful. At this rate, do you want to heal all the injured? In all conscience, Gretel really didn't think about treating all the injured. The clay figurine also has a rustic temperament, not to mention blocking the door to make trouble, which really violates his taboo. Let him cure everyone, what a joke. In the past, there was nothing we could do. The dean was in charge and the health commission was in charge. It would not work without treatment. Even if someone stabs a doctor in a hospital and then jumps off a building and is seriously injured, the doctor still has to save him while holding his nose. Now, After greet through the cobweb technique, he took a detour and returned to the hospital through the back door. He stood far away in the lobby on the first floor and kept giving instructions. Ignore the uninjured ones. Let them lie down. The spider web spell will dissipate in half an hour at most, which is just enough time for them to calm down. Tell them to break down my door. Those with injured limbs but no bleeding need not be cared for. They will not die. Leave them to the city guards. Bring here people who are injured in the head, stomach, or have been trampled. Let me take a look. We only care about saving lives, not treating injuries. If we hang on to one life, we will throw it to the city guards. By the way, when handing over to the city guards, leave a group of people behind. Let them wipe the door before leaving. And my bed. My treatment bed. Wipe them all clean. The barbarians trudged hard through the spider web. Pull out one, and another, and another. Thick cobwebs clung to the arms and legs. After taking a few steps, the hands and legs were covered with thick layers. Hearing Greet's shout, Xianggu shrugged. It's okay, I don't have bad intentions. Hey, tell me, since Mr. said that people with injured limbs don't need to be taken care of, can we secretly kick them? We can't let others hit them so many times in vain. That makes sense, keep the noise down, I don't think Sir will care. A big foot came towards me. Mr. Viper was startled, closed his eyes and curled up, shouting. I didn't do anything. I wanted to stop them. My stomach hurts. Ouch. The smell of big feet swayed around in front of me and then shrank back. Viper Arezzo tried his best to close his eyes, pretending to be extremely weak, and was picked up by two big hands, shaking left and right. Pull out a few spider threads, connect the remaining spider threads on the body and legs across the sky of the spider web, and hand them to the next pair of big hands. As for how sticky the cobwebs are, and how many pieces of rags and other things got stuck to them during transportation, that's completely out of consideration. Mr. Viper felt a chill on his legs. Hissing one piece, hissing another piece. After 3 or 4 consecutive transitions, he was placed on a flat board, and 2 people lifted him up and ran away. The man in front ran and shouted. Give it! Give it! This one has a stomach injury. I got it! Come over here and line up. Take a photo first. After putting the tablet down, Arezzo felt like he was being picked up again and turned around. He opened his eyes slightly and saw a group of people running back and forth in the hall, carrying the injured, checking them, and sending them to treatment rooms. The person carrying the person walked away and went out to pick up the next group. No one is idle, and no one stands in the way of others. It seems that although the cooperation is a bit jerky, they all know what they are doing. Most of the spellcasters are not high level, mainly mage apprentices and first level mage. The target was at the deepest part of the hall, at least 10 meters away from him, and it was unlikely that he could be killed with a single sprint. Is it the magic device in the hall? Mr. Viper felt it, and his attention immediately turned to the wall on the left. There was a pair of big deer antlers hanging on the wall, spread out flat and looking to be more than 3 meters wide. The shape looked familiar, and Mr. Viper estimated that it should be the shed antlers of the silver moon deer. At this moment, a wounded man was being brought to the front of the antlers, and was lifted upright by the barbarians. Not far away, a pagan priest sat in front of the table. He threw a detection magic over, squinted his eyes and observed carefully, and nodded. The ribs are fine, the skull is fine. Turn around, I'll take a look at the spine again, there's nothing wrong with it, send it off, next one. How did he figure it out? He's such a poor man, he shouldn't have magic items on him. Besides, even if there are magic items, what does it have to do with ribs, spine, and skull? Mr. Arezzo was carried over out of curiosity and stood in front of the antlers. Sure enough, the pagan priest threw over another detection magic. Mr. Viper was in a semi-conscious state and was held in the hands of the barbarian, observing him casually. Don't be afraid, just take a look, I don't carry any magic items that can be detected, and my own aura is also well controlled. After so many years of being a killer, if I can't control it well, I will be dead a long time ago. The pagan priest looked at him up and down, left and right. After a moment's pause, he suddenly blew a whistle vigorously. Squeak. As soon as the whistle blew, there was chaos in the medical center. Bernard rushed over from the side, picked up Greet and ran back. The mages who had time to retreat immediately retreated, those who did not have time to retreat immediately entered the treatment room and slammed the door. The barbarian security guards immediately gathered together, and from a small room, they methodically took out the tower shield, hammer, iron axe, and mace, and formed a battle formation. The Ares priest's magical skills followed suit. The barbarian carrying Mr. Viper threw the person in his hand in the direction of the antlers, turned around and ran away. Immediately, a hemispherical ice wall emerged out of thin air, trapping Arezzo inside. Did I reveal my secret? What happened? Detection magic shouldn't be able to capture me. Why do they think I'm suspicious? Wait, with ice wall technique covering me like this, controlling more than attacking, have they already decided that I have malicious intentions, or are they just a little suspicious? Can I pretend to be innocent, pretend to be pitiful, pretend to be an ordinary injured person, disarm them, and then wait for an opportunity to assassinate? Mr. Viper closed his eyes, fell into a coma, and was thrown out. He hit the ice wall, slid down softly, and half rolled on the ground, groaning in pain. The whole body language is saying I can't do it anymore, I'm going to die. The hall quickly became quiet. Bang 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 bang, heavy things fell from all sides. Arezzo held his breath and pricked up his ears, and heard someone in the distance whispering. What's wrong? Is this person suspicious? It can't be photographed, at least it's a third-level professional, maybe higher. If you're still pretending to be like this after being a third-level professional, there must be something wrong. The silver moon deer is a level 8 magical beast, and its fallen horns are also level 8 magic materials. People whose bone structure cannot be photographed must be professionals of level 3 or above, or have blessed themselves with a void detection. There is definitely something wrong with wearing rags, blending in with the crowd, and pretending to be trampled by a group of civilians. With the physical strength of a level 3 warrior, it is impossible for a poor person to step on him while lying on the ground. Hell, it was really exposed. Arezzo's heart sank. I paid special attention when I was wandering around the door before, but I didn't see the relevant magic circle with monitoring level. Those kind of gadgets are either very big or extremely expensive. They are usually installed in palaces, grand temples, grand auction houses, and other places. How could such a newly built medical center exist? Forget it, don't worry, just go. Arezzo turned his hand, and a dark dagger slipped out and stabbed directly. Ice wall technique is a 4th level magic. It has not yet solidified at this moment. After receiving his full blow, it shattered into pieces as expected. Okay, it's not the enhanced version. Arezzo dodged and rushed out of the broken ice. He glanced at the back door of the hall, turned around and ran away without looking back. What a pity. This opportunity to get close to the target is too rare. If the secret is exposed like this, it will be even harder to kill him in the future, but there is a fourth level magic circle in the hall, and there are no knows what traps are in the backyard. For the sake of safety, give up this opportunity. His dagger flew and spun quickly. A thick iron gate has been put down at the gate of the medical center, but it cannot stop the dark fang in his hand. He took out a hole, bent down slightly, and slipped out softly. No one dared to pursue. A master who can quickly break through the ice wall technique. In the entire medical center, only Cyrilla can compete with him. This lady happened to be shopping again. But Mr. Viper didn't know all this. He ran for his life, turned down one street, then another, and plunged into the woods. When he came out again, he was half a foot shorter, a little fatter, and his clothes and demeanor were also very different. He walked slowly into the street, raised his cane, and called a carriage. After a while, when Archmage Grom arrived at the medical center surrounded by the law enforcement team, he saw the street was completely white, the door of the medical center was closed, and the city guards were holding weapons, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. What's the situation? The high-level mage of the necromantic system was at a loss for a moment. Everyone is tied up in the spider web, so they should be safe. What happened to the medical center? He threw himself a loudspeaker spell and shouted several times before the iron gate at the gate rose. Greet came out with the people. There was a suspicious person just now. The medical center activated the alert, but he still escaped. Archmage Grom threw a detection spell with a sullen expression. Under the magical vision, a trace was extremely clear. First, he lingered opposite the medical center for a long time, then suddenly rushed into the crowd, and was carried into the hospital again. Inside the ice wall technique, powerful energy suddenly burst out, breaking through the ice wall and rushing out at high speed. Stretch straight into the distance and never look back. I will send someone to investigate. Archmage Grom nodded to the law enforcement team, indicating that they would first ask the people around them and do some peripheral work. And he himself grabbed Gretel. As for you, follow me back to Babel Tower immediately. Don't come out until someone catches you. 3,000 words. Completed another update. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 485. Chapter 484 Vaccine Hearing. Do you want to die stupidly? If Viper Arezzo knew that his target was sent directly to the Tower of Babel because of this unsuccessful trial, he would probably burst into tears. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you being so cautious? With just the slightest hint of trouble, people are shoved back under the nose of the legendary mage. How little confidence do you have in the fighting power of this Nordmark mage? If he was really afraid of something happening, he could just stuff it back into his mage tower. Why carry it directly to the top of the mountain? But he didn't know. So, Mr. Viper wandered from bar to bar and market to market, pricking up his ears to eavesdrop on various whispers, and at the same time he was full of doubts. Who is so considerate that he got a group of people to cause trouble? Definitely not their own family. He is just an operator and has no authority to give such orders to local spies. Moreover, it is impossible for secret agents who are waiting to organize people to cause such a thing. The success rate is close to zero. The benefits don't seem to be much. They send a wave of poor people to the jail of the city hall, and they still have to find ways to make money from them. What are you picturing? What's the fuss about? The effect of organizing poor people's protests is very good. It was still the high-end villa in the Garden District. At the long table of the club, someone lit a pipe beautifully. It fully expresses the resentment and protest of the people, especially the poor and small business owners. Humph, 1 gold coin per person, which is 8 to 9 million gold coins. All this money will be added to the poor after going round and round. That's right. If a laundry charges 100 gold coins, it will definitely not be able to continue to operate. If it cannot continue to operate, it will close down. As long as it closes down, 100 washerwomen will lose their jobs. The previous tabloids, cartoons, performances in pubs, and the protests I asked all gentlemen to convey have finally been completely ignited by yesterday's incident. The latest news is that Parliament has decided to hold a hearing in 5 days to discuss the vaccination bill. That's right. Those magicians will come up with something new today and something new tomorrow. If they don't have enough money, they will reach out to us. If you want to increase taxes, you must pass the hearing, otherwise we will not live. The wealthy businessmen and nobles who did not want to pay all nodded. Come on, who wants to actually smash and grab? In this world, the arms of civilians cannot twist the thighs of professionals, and a random magician can smooth things over. To make a fuss is to show the attitude of the magicians and give those who promote the hearing an excuse. Look, even the civilians can't stand it anymore. You said before that it was for their benefit. For this reason, when they encouraged people to make trouble, they didn't even bring rocks or sticks with them. It is said that what was smashed at the scene was mud dug from the ground and dog poop picked up. Okay, gentlemen, the speaker announcing the hearing clapped his hands. Now that the Parliament has decided, we also have to show some sincerity. In recent days, the tabloids and the bards in the pub have all restrained themselves a little. Those who should be reasonable, but those who are sarcastic, and spread rumors will not do so for the time being. Don't mention it. Let's study again who will speak at the hearing and how to state it. Several heads wearing wool curlers came together and secretly rubbed and blended. On the long table, tabloids, manuscripts, and pamphlets were piled up one after another. Greet, who was immersed in research, was also pulled out of the laboratory with a blank look on his face. Before I could sit down, a bunch of pamphlets were piled up in front of me. What? You will also attend a hearing in 5 days. This is a bill that is scheduled to be implemented. These are the remarks that have appeared in the market recently. Take a look and you can argue with them when the time comes. No, why do you want me to go with you? I am just the inventor of the vaccine, not the maker of the system. The protest was ineffective. Obviously, more than one archmage felt that since Gretel is the inventor, he must know more than others, and it is right to take him there. The door of the laboratory was closed behind him, and Gretel could only mumble and bury his head into the paper pile. 5 days later, a hearing on whether to promote universal vaccination was held in the Great Chamber of City Hall, the same chamber where Gretel debated in public when the Public Health Organization was proposed. Archmage Grom attended the review meeting on behalf of the 3 major churches, local nobles, and wealthy businessmen. Either attending or observing, the conference hall was almost packed to the brim. At the end of the large conference hall, a group of civilians were even let in. It seemed that this was to ensure that the views of all parties were taken into account. Gretel sat next to the Archmage, looking around, feeling very relieved. Yes, this time at the hearing, he was finally not the one taking the lead. There is Archmage Grom, and there are magicians from the medical department. There was actually an intermediate mage from the prophecy department, sitting safely on the other side of Archmage Grom, as if he was going to testify. Will the testimony obtained through the prophecy spell be effective in this kind of hearing? Greet wasn't so sure. However, several priests from the Order of the God of Nature, the Temple of the God of War, and the Temple of the Goddess of Spring, who had helped during the smallpox vaccination, were also following behind them. Well, what these people said should be relatively objective and fair. The first item on the agenda of the meeting was to distribute and read out the draft of the vaccination law. Gretel had already seen it, and most of his attention at the moment was on observing the opponent's attitude. Vaccination is supervised by the Public Health Department. There is no objection to this, and everyone seems to think it is normal. The government will list special expenditures and purchase vaccines. The shortfall in the current budget will be made up by special taxes. When this article was brought up, the faces of the wealthy businessmen and nobles became a little ugly, as if they did not want to be taxed. Require the authorities to sign an agreement with regular healers to promote free vaccination, and the vaccination fees will be uniformly paid by the authorities. The priests of the god of nature are very happy, the temple of the god of war is just average, and the temple of the spring goddess, some are happy and some are not happy. All children must be vaccinated within 3 years of age, otherwise parents will be punished. Vaccination registrars are responsible for informing parents and recording vaccination information. Hey! I haven't done any clinical trials on children under 3 years old. Why are you starting now? After reading the draft, it immediately enters the debate stage. A man wearing tortoise-shell glasses stood up opposite Gretel, waving a copy of The Anti-Vaccinator and making an impassioned speech. Disease outbreaks mainly originate from harsh environments. Only by ensuring environmental sanitation and clean air can diseases be eradicated. So-called vaccinations are of no use. What? Gretel pressed the table in front of him and wanted to refute. The man pushed up his glasses and hit the table with the pamphlet in his hand, making a loud banging sound. Injecting pathogens into the human body contaminates the human blood, damages the entire body, increases people's risk of contracting fatal diseases such as syphilis, and threatens the life safety of the recipient. The content of the hearing is more suitable for enlargement, so I will try to use 4,000 words in the afternoon. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 486. Gretel held his chin and sighed. To a certain extent, it is true that disease outbreaks mainly originate from poor environments. There are certainly benefits to making the environment cleaner. But when it comes to ensuring environmental sanitation and clean air to eliminate diseases, vaccination is of no use. Alas, mankind has gone through too many detours on the road to medical research. He was still organizing his words, and people in the row of seats behind him were already raising their hands impatiently. After getting permission from the host, the man stood up from the back of his chair and asked as his first sentence, "What is your name, sir?" Gretel turned his head slightly and saw that the spokesman was about 30 years old, burly, with a small silver shield-shaped badge hanging on the chest of his white robe, probably only half a finger long. "Okay, God of War priest." Look at the man in front of him again. He is thin and elegant, and the tortoise-shell glasses on the bridge of his nose are a bit unsightly. Obviously, to take the civilian route, you'd either be a spellcaster or a scholar. However, in this case, if there is no mage badge or priest mark on the chest, does that mean you are a scholar? It makes sense that the Ares priest doesn't know the scholar. Just as he was thinking about it, the person who initially said that vaccination is useless had already pushed up the rim of his glasses and replied proudly. Charles Clayton. My views on diseases have been discussed in detail in my humble work on epidemics. As for vaccines, I have just finished writing and have not yet published a study concerning the smallpox vaccine. This aspect was also elaborated on. As he spoke, he pushed a pile of pamphlets beside him. A clerk from the conference hall had already come forward to take it and distribute it around. The Ares priest glanced at 10 lines, then raised his head. "Mr. Clayton, you just said that disease outbreaks mainly originate from harsh environments. However, a few years ago, Master Nordmark's research on several epidemic pathogenic bacteria has proved that the main source of plague outbreaks is due to the massive proliferation of pathogenic bacteria. Regarding this, Mr. Clayton, how do you explain it?" Gretel lowered his head silently, pretending that he didn't exist. By the way, the feeling of being suddenly cued by such a person at the scene is inexplicably shameful. Alas, if he were the Ares priest, he would certainly not use germ theory as an argument. "Sure enough," Mr. Clayton said proudly. "Hard environment and pathogenic bacteria are not in conflict. The dirtier the environment, the more pathogenic bacteria can breed in large numbers. But conversely, germ theory cannot explain all plagues. What is the pathogenic bacteria of smallpox? Well, the Ares priest was at a loss for words. In the row in front, Archmage Grom threw a psychic link over and asked Gretel secretly. What is it? Greet pursed her lips and shook her head silently. Smallpox virus is not a bacterium. It is hundreds of times smaller than a bacterium. How do you want me to explain the concept of virus to you? Either get me the electron microscope, or at least get the bacterial filter. After filtering the bacteria, it can still be transmitted, which proves that there is a pathogen that is much smaller than bacteria, but can still cause illness. There is obviously an answer, but I can't explain it. It's a grievance. Oh, wait, in this world, we still need to prove that it is pathogens that cause diseases, not some kind of magic. Fortunately, in the ensuing verbal battle, the Ares priest was slightly better. He took Greet's thick medical record book and swung it with the record that after vaccination with cowpox, smallpox cannot be transmitted, perfectly refuting the argument that vaccination is useless. After refuting Mr. Clayton, I retreated step by step, so I could only jump to the next question. Then, the vaccine harms the human body and increases the risk of syphilis infection. What do you say? This. The Ares priest was stunned. A vaccine, since it is a vaccine, must first make people sick. As for syphilis, this. He has never heard of this. Gretel coughed lightly and took over the conversation. According to our research, the infection with syphilis is not due to vaccination with cowpox, but because the needle carries one person's blood and is directly inserted into the skin of another person without adequate disinfection. His voice was loud and he looked around. So we have been strictly controlling the vaccination process, one injection per person, and never sharing needles. All injection equipment must be recovered and sterilized at high temperatures before they can be used again. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a gentle discussion in the conference hall. Behind him, he took out 10 gold coins, or 1 gold coin. The vaccinated gentlemen looked at each other, nodded, and whispered. Yes, the syringe I was given was put into the box immediately and was not taken out again. It's the same one I've used. The needle I used is also. Gretel smiled slightly and raised his voice. So, Mr. Clayton, do you have any examples of people who contracted other diseases simply because of vaccination with cowpox, not because of needle contamination? I thought you didn't. Sure enough, Mr. Clayton sat down. Gretel just breathed a sigh of relief when another person stood up opposite and made an impassioned speech. Nevis is a free city. Forcing everyone to be vaccinated deprives free people of the right to dispose of their own bodies, causing them to lose the civil rights they originally enjoyed in a free country. What the hell? Gretel, who was born under a red flag in her previous life, has to think about it before she can understand the twists and turns involved. Are you kidding me? There are always a group of vaccines that are compulsory. From BCG and hepatitis B vaccines 24 hours after birth, to polio vaccine and diphtheria tetanus pertussis vaccine at 2 to 3 months, to meningococcal vaccine, measles vaccine, and Japanese encephalitis vaccine in June, July and August. As soon as the baby is born, parents will receive a booklet to remind you to vaccinate your child on time. Do not hit. No one will impose a fine or go to jail if you don't pay the fine. However, if your child wants to go to kindergarten or elementary school and has no vaccination record, go and get the vaccination first. Vaccine freedom. Is it okay not to fight if you want? It doesn't exist. I thought it was those foreigners who were stupid and took the vaccine for granted. Oh, I forgot, there is indeed a group of foreigners here. Damn it, they are all equally stupid. Greet sighed deeply, completely unwilling to meet the other person. He tilted his head, held his chin, and listened to the red-bearded man opposite. Only when individuals follow their inner wishes and act freely can they promote social progress. Obviously, so far, what the state has done is what individuals can do. Interfering with this will restrict and hinder personal development and affect social progress. The vaccination bill tramples on the people's wish to be free from disease, and the action is completely counterproductive. Compulsory vaccination is a tyranny of the government trying to dominate an individual's body. It violates everyone's freedom. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Allowing freedom is equivalent to the chaos seen in Western countries in the face of the new coronavirus epidemic in previous lives. Greed finally couldn't bear it anymore. "Sir, do you think freedom has no boundaries?" Redbeard was stunned. Gretel didn't know him, but judging from his clothes and the order of his conversation, he guessed that he was also a scholar. "Since you are a scholar, you cannot speak too unconscionably in public." He was stunned for a moment. Of course not entirely. A person's freedom, at least, cannot infringe on others. But the freedom of not being vaccinated is infringing on others. Gretel stood up, bowed slightly to the host, and then saluted to the audience on three sides. "Everyone, regarding the process and speed of the plague's spread, I have a piece of evidence here, and I apply to present it to the hearing." There was another wave of excitement in the auditorium. When the host saw several temple representatives and noble representatives nodding slightly, he immediately raised his gavel and banged. "Permission to show." Gretel patted the space bag, took out a square wooden plate 2 feet long, 1 foot wide, and 3 inches deep, placed it on the long table in the middle, and took out a bag of white balls with a diameter of 1 inch, and poured it down. "Look, these balls are normal healthy people. Now, several people have contracted smallpox. We all know that smallpox can be contagious. Greet grabbed a few white balls, rolled them in the toner next to them, and threw them back to the wooden plate. The white ball rolled twice and soon turned several nearby balls black. Of course, his right hand was also stained with toner, and he had to use a cleaning technique to clean it off. There was a squeak behind him. Someone whispered, "So stupid, since you are a magician, you should use a more elegant method." Greet tried hard to pretend not to hear and ignore it. "Grace. I also want to be elegant, but I can't be elegant." In fact, when he sought the help of Archmage Grom in order to design this exhibition plan, he encountered the same doubt. "Can't you use magic?" "Well, I also want to try using magic." Gretel smiled and applied for the usage time of the tower spirit. "Well, it's better not to invite Mr. Herman Cruz. Are there any reserve tower spirits who haven't been installed in the tower yet? Can you please request one to come and help? It's not that troublesome. It's just a small problem. If you don't want to go to the tower spirit of Babel Tower, just go to the Black Crow Swamp. It's better to be cautious." Gretel and the Archmage fought against each other again, and finally won. Archmage Grom relied on 2 connections to borrow a reserve tower spirit. Archmage Grom was still muttering beside him. "Are you still afraid of ruining the tower spirit? You can really spoil the tower spirit. I will pay for the tower spirit's money for you." Gretel, rightward arrow. Rightward arrow. If I weren't afraid of something happening, I would randomly throw in a barber's paradox and let him calculate it, and I'd blow it up for you in a minute. Of course, business matters now. Gretel watched the Archmage manipulate the tower spirit and temporarily connect the energy pool of the magic tower. He thought for a moment and began to command. "First, project a light curtain. How big or small is it?" "A grid of 1000 by 800 will do." "Okay." The tower spirit, which had not brushed the character template and was still in the initial settings, agreed and weaved a light curtain in the void. Gretel gave the next command. "Generate 100 small balls with random positions." "What is random?" "Well." Gretel started pulling at his hair. "What is random?" This is a really good question, especially when you want to explain it to a tower spirit, or, In other words, an artificial intelligence. You use coordinates to confirm the position of the ball, take any value from 1 to 1000 in the horizontal direction, and take any value from 1 to 800 in the vertical direction to determine the position of the ball number 1. The rest of the balls can be deduced by analogy. If the previous ball is repeated, then give up this value and start again. The light screen flashed, then flashed again, and soon the first ball appeared. Then, number 2, number 3, number 4. Appeared one after another. Within a few breaths, 100 small balls were scattered across the entire screen. Okay, now, mark the balls 1 to 5 as black, let all the balls roll and collide randomly, as if a hand is shaking them on the plate. The white balls that collide with the black balls become black, and then die more balls black. Excuse me, how do you roll randomly? How do you bounce back after a collision? Random rolling, you divide a circle into 360 degrees, forget it, 36 degrees, choose any direction, and then let the ball roll at a random speed between 1 and 10 frames per second. After the collision, the rebound how? Assuming that the two sides collide elastically, that is, neither loses kinetic energy, then the speed and direction of dispersion after the collision should be. Gretel started writing formulas with his head down. Fortunately, okay, I have learned the relevant content in the medical physics class, and I can still recall the formulas. The light curtain flashed gently, as if the tower spirit was also trying to learn, understand, and apply the formula entered by Gretel. After a while, 5 black balls and 95 white balls started beating wildly. Soon, there was a strange clicking sound inside the tower, and a wisp of black smoke curled up. Gretel's quick eyesight and quick hands activated the shield technique. Random rolling and collision seemed to be too difficult for Tolling, especially to handle the rolling and collision of 100 balls at the same time. Even if friction is not considered, the calculation amount is too large. Or is my programming ability too poor? Obviously, in the previous life, there were masters who wrote programs and made more complex demonstration animations. We also need to consider different R0, different incubation periods, onset periods, and death times. Gretel, who was playing with the backup tower spirit, did not apply for the main tower spirit of Black Crow Swamp or even the tower spirit of Babel Tower to do a simulation demonstration. So, he could only stretch out his hands, each holding one side of the wooden plate, and shook it hard. Now, these people work, live, study, play, move around, and have a high chance of coming into contact with each other. The black ball stained the white ball. The dirty ball collided with other clean white balls and soon became black again. Gretel shook it back and forth dozens of times, his vest was hot and his head was sweating. He simply sat back, flew up a few enhanced mage hands, and shook the wooden plate. Not long after, out of the 100 white balls in the wooden tray, 70 or 80 were stained with a layer of dirty black ash. Look, if everyone is likely to get smallpox, then in a pandemic, so many people will be infected in the end. Then let's take a look at what will happen if some people have been vaccinated against cowpox and will not get smallpox again. Sample. He collected the dirty balls and poured down 80 white balls. He took out another transparent and smooth glass ball and held it high. Look, everyone, this glass ball has been processed and will not be contaminated with toner. Let's use it to simulate a person who will not get smallpox. Let's try it again. Of course, the processing process is very troublesome and the accuracy cannot be achieved in any case. Finally, a transformation mage was used to add cleaning skills to these glass balls, giving them the ability to self-remove toner. This needs no special explanation. Gretel dropped 20 glass balls and shook the wooden disc again. It was obvious that the white balls became dirty much slower. Greet kept reducing the white balls and adding glass balls. When there are only 20 white balls and as many as 80 glass balls, it is obvious that it takes a long time of vigorous shaking by the hand of the mage before even one white ball is stained by toner. Very intuitive. The host smiled in appreciation. Greet nodded in thanks, and applause erupted from small to large in the auditorium. So, promoting universal vaccination is for each of us and for the health of our loved ones. Do you have any questions? 4,000 words. Successfully completed an additional update. However, I did not succeed in writing this scene. I will continue tomorrow. P.S. I consulted with several big guys today and they all said that Talling will definitely crash .. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 487. So, promoting universal vaccination is for each of us and for the health of our loved ones. Do you have any questions? Have. Several hands on the other side were raised high. The host looked at him, then looked across from him, and banged the gavel. The gentleman in the black coat on the far right of the second row, please speak. First of all, thank you for inventing cowpox and protecting people's lives and health. The person who raised his hand stood up calmly and bowed to greet first. Gretel hurriedly returned the gift, and the other party smiled slightly and continued. I have a question, and I would like to ask Master Nordmark to clarify it. It is also to defend against smallpox. Do I have the right to decide which method to use? If I decide, I want to infect smallpox and then use the method of removing the disease to get. He paused, recalled the words in Gretel's paper, and then continued. To obtain immunity, so can I be exempted from vaccination with cowpox? This must be possible. The foundation of the City of Mage is freedom. The churches and magical councils, the free citizens and their descendants shall at all times enjoy the full and complete enjoyment of the following freedoms. This sentence is engraved on the stone tablet where all parties swear an oath at the beginning of the mountain road leading to Igor Peak. Before Gretel could respond, several mages on both sides of him nodded at the same time. The person who raised his hand smiled and said, since there are exceptions and mandatory vaccination for all, I don't think it is necessary. Mr. Nordmark, what do you think? Fortunately, someone raised this issue during the previous deduction. Greet secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled confidently, turned to the clergy opposite the host, and bowed slightly. My dear bishops, I have something to ask you. Accepting magical treatment and recovering in a short period of time will cause a certain loss to the person, isn't it? In the Church of the God of Nature and the Temple of the Spring Goddess, several healers nodded slightly. A bishop from the Temple of the God of War said simply, that's right. Therefore, even if an injured soldier is healed by divine magic, it is best not to go to the battlefield immediately. He should eat, drink and recuperate for a while. This is common sense in magical treatment. You should also know it. How to return it? Come and ask. Mr. Bishop, you are too honest. Isn't this just setting the stage for the next sentence? Greet tried hard to ignore the laughter next to him. As long as I am not embarrassed, others will be embarrassed. He looked directly into the bishop's eyes and continued to ask. So, if a young child receives too many magical treatments, will it cause too much damage and affect his future development potential? Well. Several healers exchanged glances with each other. Pastor Matthew, who was present on behalf of the Order of the God of Nature, was the first to speak. We mainly treat poor people, and we don't have a lot of information in this area. But in my impression, there are young people with good qualifications who suffered 2 serious injuries during their growth period. Although they were cured, their future was cut off. We mainly treat warriors here, the Bishop of the God of War Temple answered secondly. Children who are not old enough to practice martial arts rarely come to us to ask for treatment. Okay, there is no information here either. All eyes at the scene fell on the priest of the spring goddess. As a goddess, the teachings of the spring goddess naturally include the teaching of protecting mothers, young children, and protecting families. In contrast, the goddess of spring water's magical arts have more to do with treatment, purification, and cure of diseases than others. The priest straightened the end of his belt and said uncertainly, "Generally speaking, if you often need to receive magical treatment when you are young, it is true that there are very few high-level warriors. But, maybe it is because you are already weak. Weakness equals no potential equals at least it is not easy to achieve success on the path of a warrior, which makes sense." Greet shrugged, "Well, this view is supported by specious arguments and requires extensive data collection and elimination of interference items. However, you can't ignore the danger to your child just because there may not be a problem." He turned to the questioner seriously. "So, if young children receive too many magical treatments, their potential may be lost. I think, as parents, you always want your children to have an easier life, right? Even if the parents have used remove disease, where are the nannies around the children? Where are the guards? The cooks, servants, and playmates outside? It is obviously impossible to throw a remove disease at everyone a child may come into contact with. Life is priceless, and life is valuable. The value of a civilian's life, no matter what, is less than 100 gold coins. The city of Nevis hired an adult man to work in the New World for 10 years, and the price paid was only a few dozen gold coins. The sea is rough and the waves are rough, and the future of the New World is unpredictable. After 10 years, there will be very few people who can earn enough for the ship ticket and some savings to come back. Once you go there, you will almost never be able to return to the north for the rest of your life. Therefore, this price is mostly regarded as the life price. No one would be so stupid to pay 750 gold coins for a life worth less than 100 gold coins. In order to make the environment for their children as safe as possible, it is obvious that it is beneficial to the nobles and wealthy businessmen to fully implement cowpox vaccination. As soon as Greet's question was raised, the original opponents in the hearing room softened their expressions. Greet sat down calmly and listened to the two sides continuing to exchange words. Soon, the debate about compulsory cowpox vaccination advanced from should it be necessary to how should it be implemented. Opponents questioned that 8 to 9 million gold coins a year is too high. The parliament said, by purchasing pox vaccines in large quantities and using cheap vaccination equipment, the per capita price can be reduced to less than 1 silver coin, which means that at most 80,000 or 90,000 gold coins. Opponents questioned that it is still too expensive to charge so much tax at once. The parliament stated that anyway, cowpox vaccination should be gradually rolled out and can be collected and vaccinated in batches. Opponents questioned that there are not that many people who need the authorities to pay for vaccinations. The parliament replied, at least the poor need the authorities to pay. So how many people are definitely in extreme poverty and need the authorities to bear the cost of vaccination? Someone on the opposition side asked loudly. There was silence around Gretel for a moment. Behind Archmage Greet, to the left, a city hall official with a mustache flipped through the information and said slowly. First of all, the poor in the workhouses must be borne by the authorities. As of now, there are 3 workhouses in Nevis, housing 2,685 poor people. At 1 silver coin per person, that's more than 200 gold coins, but less than 300. There was a sound of exhalation in the conference hall. This small amount of money was covered by everyone present throwing a handful of money. Which gentleman can't take out 3 or 5 gold coins in his pocket? Oh, the mages probably can't afford it. They are more accustomed to digging out mage badges and paying contribution points. The atmosphere in the conference hall relaxed. The mustachioed official continued. Secondly, the poor who receive out-of-hospital relief should not be able to afford the money and need help from the authorities. The number of this group of people is. Out-of-hospital relief is one of the implementation methods of the poverty relief system. Many poor people did not live in workhouses, but received weekly cash relief, as well as regular in-kind relief, including clothing, food, quilts, fuel, etc., and sometimes even rental relief. This number is difficult to count. Fortunately, the city of Nevis has implemented a poverty relief system for hundreds of years and has accumulated sufficient experience. The average annual relief fund for each poor person is about 1 gold coin. As long as we calculate the funding over the years, we can draw a rough conclusion. About 40,000 people. In other words, 1 in every 25 people in the entire city of Nevis is so poor that he needs to receive relief grain to fill his stomach and bedding for the winter. It is obviously impossible to expect these people to pay 1 silver coin each. This money must be paid by the city hall. I agree, it's up to the authorities. Agree. Agree. There was a mixed chorus of approval. The host seized the opportunity and struck with a gavel. So, among the extremely poor people receiving relief, compulsory vaccination will be implemented, and the cost will be borne by the authorities. Does anyone object to this suggestion? No one objected. What 40,000 people need is only 4,000 gold coins, which is just a drop in the bucket compared to 800,000 or 900,000 gold coins. Even if the noble master doesn't contribute the money, the wealthy businessmen in the city can easily share. It's just a matter of skipping a few big meals and buying 2 pieces of clothes, so that I won't be unable to afford it. And let's be honest, the destitute have value too. My lords and gentlemen can clearly see that establishing a poverty relief system to support these extremely poor people not only follows God's teachings to appease the poor and increase social stability, but also has practical value. Those who lived in the workhouse had to work non-stop every day. Even children as young as 6 or 7 years old have to sort threads, weave hemp ropes for cables, and do all kinds of work within their ability. For those who receive out-of-hospital relief, the rations are simply not enough to eat. If you want to receive relief, you must follow the guidelines of the poor, go to some workshops and shops, and do the hardest and most tiring work to earn a meal for yourself. At worst, these extremely poor people can still have children. When the child grows up, he can enter a workshop, become a soldier, and go to the New World to occupy territory. Population is an important resource for this society. Relatively speaking, if each person throws another silver coin, it is a one-time expenditure to ensure that the previous silver coin does not fall into the water every year, and there is no loss. Next, a compulsory and free vaccination system will be implemented for newborn babies. Does anyone object? No one objects to this. If a baby dies due to smallpox, it means that the mother has to give birth again, which takes up a year of labor time of a woman of childbearing age. The value of labor is far more than 1 silver coin. Not to mention the damn maternal mortality rate in this world. Anyway, in the entire city of Nevis, only a few thousand babies are born a year, so they can afford a few hundred gold coins. Does anyone object to the implementation of compulsory vaccination for workers who have close contact with people and may spread smallpox, such as coachmen, porters, restaurant servants, laundresses, tailors, and workers in garment and blanket making workshops? There was silence in the conference hall. Gretel looked around and understood the thoughts of the adults and gentlemen very well. These workers are the most vulnerable to the disease. For the sake of their own safety, it is best not to object. Well, it is unlikely that the citywide mandatory vaccination will be implemented immediately within a short period of time. Compulsory vaccination for specific groups of people, covering those most in need of protection, the plan is approved. Gretel gave himself a thumbs up. Seeing the mustached city official finish his speech, he raised his hand and added. Also, People setting off to the New World should be vaccinated against cowpox before boarding the ship. Does anyone object to this? The natives of the New World are the least resistant. If a smallpox patient is let go, if he is unlucky, he can die in one settlement. Greet felt that he was far-sighted and what he said made sense. Unexpectedly, Archmage Grom next to him coughed. Mage Nordmark, there is no need to talk about this kind of thing in the conference. Gretel. Writing these chapters, the information will kill me. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 488. Viper Arezzo discovered that the news that opposed, ridiculed, and attacked cowpox vaccination suddenly disappeared. No more print in tabloids. The minstrel stopped singing. When he was playing cards in the tavern and complaining to people, someone actually refuted him. Where do you need 8 or 900,000 gold coins? 10,000 at most. It is said that the gentleman at the hearing donated half of it on the spot. We need to divide it up to 5,000 at most. Shouldn't it be compulsory for those poor people who are on relief to be vaccinated? It would also prevent them from infecting us. If all employees are vaccinated, the City Hall will issue a certificate to prove it. I have asked all the rug weavers to get vaccinated. With this sign, I can shout loudly, "Buy my blankets," without worrying about being infected. What happened? Why did the wind direction suddenly change overnight? Mr. Arezzo asked and asked until he finally figured out what was going on. It turned out that after secretly spreading rumors in the City Hall, creating public opinion by aristocratic and wealthy businessmen who did not want to pay taxes, and finally communicating at a hearing, a satisfactory compromise was reached among various forces. One compulsory vaccination for all people will not be promoted for the time being and will be changed to compulsory vaccination for some key groups. 2. Cancel the special vaccination tax and instead impose a one-time special poverty tax, and seek donations for the shortfall. 3. Lower prices and encourage the general population to vaccinate at their own expense. The City Hall will favor those who have been vaccinated in terms of hiring temporary employees and purchasing services. 4. My previous movements of hands and feet were in vain. Mr. Viper was a little annoyed. Fortunately, he was just playing a casual chess game, and he didn't expect to succeed with the cowpox incident. Once the matter is over, let it be over. If you find another opportunity, just. By the way, where is the target? Gretel is still at the top of Mount Igor. Archmage Graham took him to the City Hall and back to the top of the mountain, never letting him out of sight. In fact, as long as the Thunder Tower doesn't come to ask for anyone, this will keep him in the pyramid in Black Crow Swamp and never want to leave. Gretel is content with what he has come to. This mage tower, named the Sleepless Tower, is cold, dark, and uncomfortable to live in anywhere. It has only one advantage: it is rich in resources. Since I was left behind, I would be sorry for myself if I didn't use the resources of the Sleepless Tower to do something. Gretel felt confident and reached out to the Archmage. What? Human blood? What do you want human blood for? I want to develop a magic, Gretel said confidently. It's really troublesome to give people blood transfusions and cross-match them every time. It would be great if there was a spell that could be cast to find out what blood type it is. Wait a minute, first explain what blood type is. Give me human blood first. I want fresh blood, not too much, just find 4 people, just 2 milliliters each. For this matter, let alone Archmage Graham, any of his students can find him with a wave of his hand. What is the most common thing in Black Crow Swamp? One is the corpse, and the second is, of course, blood. The Archmage gave the order, and within 10 minutes, A necromancer came over with a tray of blood and 4 syringes of blood. Put it in front of Gretel, turn around, lean against the wall, and stand there. Gretel. Okay. Anyway, blood type is not a great mystery, you can read it if you want. When I do experiments and develop magic later, I might even recruit some young men. He pretended not to see it and didn't open his mouth to chase people away. A minute later, the second necromancer came in with a microscope, placed it properly, and stood against the wall as usual. At the third minute, another necromancer walked in quickly, holding the centrifuge that Greet had requested. Next, one person delivers the test tube, one person delivers the straw, one person delivers the saline solution, and one person delivers the water bath. There were 2 other people who really had nothing to give, so they came in empty-handed and shamelessly stood against the wall. Archmage Grom, what are you doing here? You are not even my disciples. Not my disciple's disciple. What do you want to do if you sneak in instead of leaving? The 2 necromancers looked at each other. One of them had an idea and quickly answered. Let's get ready to give blood. Yes, that's right. We provide fresh blood, his companion immediately followed. Although the others did not speak, they also nodded their heads up and down. That meaning is very clear. We are also willing to provide blood if needed. Please let us watch. Archmage Grom turned to look at the console. Seeing Greet smiling and keeping silent, it was not easy to chase people away for him, so he could only stare at the test tube and pretend not to see this group of worry-free people. A group of magicians concentrated and held their breath, watching Gray write the paper sign, stick the test tube, take the blood, put it in the centrifuge and centrifuge. Take the serum and drop it into the test tube, take the red blood under the serum, mix it into a light red liquid in physiological saline, and drop it into the serum. Shake it slightly, put it on the centrifuge again, pick it up one by one, observe it, mutter something, and quickly record. Blood sample number 1 and blood sample number 2 coagulate on the main side and coagulate on the secondary side. Blood sample number 1 and blood sample number 3 coagulate on the main side and coagulate on the secondary side. Blood sample number 1 and blood sample number 4. Gretel's operation was not fast, not even very skillful, and he seemed to be in a hurry in some places. The most thrilling time was when my hand slipped and I almost smashed the test tube. But none of the necromancers dared to go up to help. They all held their breath for fear of disturbing Gretel in the slightest. Waited for a long time, until Gretel let out a whine. It's all clotting. Hey, is there anything you can do to prevent this blood from clotting? He knew it wouldn't work without an anticoagulant, but the problem was that he couldn't make sodium citrate. The necromancers all laughed. When it comes to playing with blood, bones, and corpses, necromancer takes second place, and no school dares to take first place. In fact, when there is a necromancer in the team and fresh blood needs to be preserved, the necromancer is always the one to do it. Otherwise, how did you bring back the blood of monsters used to prepare ink and potions? And the teacher is watching. If the methods you contribute can be used, the teacher will definitely compensate you. Besides, others have generously allowed us to see their experiments, so we can't be stingy. A dozen necromancers rushed to answer. This magic consumes the least amount of money. One cast can preserve the blood of a level 3 or lower monster without drying up for 2 months. This magic is level 3, but it can last for 6 months. The blood preserved in this magic potion can be used to guide magic power in undead creatures, and it has the best effect. This kind of. After cross-comparison, 3 kinds of magic and 2 potion formulas appeared in one go. As a result, there was not enough blood for the experiment. 2 magicians immediately rushed out of the door and rushed to get blood. I don't know where to get it, but when I came back, there was a row of 50 ml syringes on the plate, full of dark red blood. Gretel was shocked when he saw it. Be careful. Don't smoke to death. A healthy adult can smoke up to 400 ml a day, and 200 ml to be safe. After smoking once, the next time you smoke will be 6 months later. Don't worry, no problem, Archmage Grom rushed to answer. After comforting him here, he immediately glanced at the students over there. Did you hear everything? Write it down quickly. Pay attention to the limit when drawing blood in the future, and don't kill people again. Does this mean that there are a group of living people being kept in captivity in Black Crow Swamp, and if they need experimental materials, do they mean to get some? Gretel didn't dare to think about it anymore. He silently recited several times, if I get the results quickly, I can save a few more people with quick hands and feet. He divided the blood into small portions of 5 milliliters per test tube for testing one by one. Archmage Grom shouted from the side. What are you doing standing still? Go up and help. Is it okay to write a paper signature? Is it okay to stick a test tube? It seems that Gray has a good character and doesn't mind if everyone skips class. Then it's just right, let the boys get started and get familiar with each other. The black robes of the necromancers fluttered, and crows filled the experimental table in an instant. Gretel took a step back happily. Treat the necromancers as labor force, stand in the position of the boss and point fingers. Don't be anxious, don't be anxious. There are 5 plans, each person is responsible for the same, the person in charge takes 8 test tubes. The 4 of you, take the syringe, inject 2 ml of blood into each test tube, pay attention to the name and the name on the test tube be consistent. Those who provide anticoagulation solutions, handle the blood in your hands, okay, line up and get into the centrifuge. Another big deal. After centrifuging, separating serum and red blood cells, making red blood cell suspension, and cross-matching blood, Gretel looked at the test tube in his hand and whined again. This is still all clotted. The anticoagulation strength is not strong enough. This is a mess. I said, blood treated with negative energy can only be used on undead creatures. The cells have lost their activity at all. This one has no coagulation, but is completely hemolyzed. This is wrong. Let me do a microscopic examination to see if all the red blood cells are broken. It can't be used. Archmage Grom was a little embarrassed. Beside the test table, 5 magicians who provided anticoagulation solutions stood in a row. None of them knew what to say. The solutions they provided had covered the most common blood preservation methods in the necromancy system, and they were still looking for others. We have to go to the pile of old papers. Oh no, the council's spell library has been rummaged through. Or go and ask someone from the medical department. The necromancer who was the first to provide a solution couldn't help but clenched his hands. Between the fingers, black powder fell. Gretel glanced briefly and suddenly jumped up. What is this in your hand? Casting materials. What casting material? Gretel squatted down and stared at the powder on the ground, almost putting his face on it. The necromancer stared at the top of his black hair and subconsciously answered. Mosquito. Why not leeches? What? Why not use a leech? Gretel's tone became more and more enthusiastic. Mosquito saliva contains anticoagulant substances, so there is no problem at all in using mosquitoes as casting materials. However, using leeches, is obviously better. The hirudin contained in leeches is a powerful anticoagulant and is often used clinically for anticoagulation and antithrombosis. Try again. Please, try again with a leech. Greet grabbed the test tube and started taking samples quickly. 4 bottles in a row, each with 2 milliliters. After filling, he pushed it toward the other person with hope. Please, let's do it again. I just don't know if using hirudin for anticoagulation will overdo it and eventually cause the coagulation to fail. If that doesn't work, you can only find a vampire to come over and see if he can taste different blood types. 3,000 words. Another update completed. In order to maintain my energy, I didn't even dare to take the third booster shot, ugh. Please subscribe, ask for monthly votes, please recommend votes, please review books, please ask for all kinds of things. The ranking on the monthly ticket list has dropped drastically recently. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 489. Hiruden, or in other words, using leeches as a spell-casting material, the anticoagulant spell released has an immediate effect. At the very least, when Greet centrifuged the blood again, sucked out the serum and red blood cells, and performed cross-matching, he could already observe that coagulation occurred in some test tubes and not in some test tubes. Of course, in some test tubes, hemolysis was observed. Look, if it doesn't clot or dissolve, it means it's the same type of blood. Gretel raised the test tube high, his eyes shining. In previous lives, regardless of whether Rh was positive or negative, humans had 4 common blood types. Looking for 4 samples, the probability of finding one person of each type is still very small, but with a relatively high probability, 2 people with the same blood type can be found. Following this path and increasing the number of samples, although it cannot prove types A, B, AB and O, there is currently a lack of conditions for studying antigens and antibodies. It can at least prove that there are several differences. Blood type? Then you can have a blood transfusion. Surgery and other things, although treatment can take care of most of the problems, but there is still blood transfusion at the side to assist, which makes me more courageous. Gretel's eyes sparkled with excitement. When I turned around, I met a group of confused eyes. The lack of blood coagulation is really not because the anticoagulation spell is too strong. It may also be because too much anticoagulant medicine is added. The principle of anticoagulant spells is to use the effective power in the casting materials to affect the blood. Yes. It could also be that pointing to the centrifuge, it spins too fast, or spins too many times, breaking all the blood cells inside, so it doesn't coagulate. Gretel took a deep breath and exhaled deeply. Not only was it not annoying, but it also felt a little intimate. I think back then, when he first entered the medical field, he was just like this, full of questions, or full of fantastic ideas, and felt that he was very imaginative. Then, the teacher sprayed him with a black face. Go and see physiology, immunology. I haven't even learned the basic theory yet, so I'm just thinking wildly. One after another, they want to fly before they even learn to walk. Of course I figured it out later. The coagulation mechanism of blood type test and the anticoagulation mechanism of anticoagulant take 2 routes. The coagulation of modern blood type tests uses the reaction of antigens and antibodies to tie red blood cells together, allowing people to observe blood coagulation. The anticoagulation of anticoagulants antagonizes the natural coagulation mechanism. For example, heparin inhibits thrombin, and EDTA removes calcium ions. Therefore, no matter how much anticoagulant is added or how strong the anticoagulant is used, it will not hinder blood coagulation during cross-matching. As for the centrifuge, red blood cells will rupture. It is probably because the centrifugal force is too strong and the red blood cells are crushed. It does not matter how many times it is turned. However, although he did not know the centrifugal force of the centrifuge used by Gretel, he was certain of one thing. The version he used was similar in size to the one used to test Corey in his previous life, and the speed was about the same. Therefore, red blood cells cannot be crushed. But again, there is currently no research conditions and no way to prove antigens or antibodies. Gretel could only draw a simple conclusion. Anyway, as long as it can be used. A batch of blood samples were produced at the same time by casting a spell. Some of them coagulated, some were hemolyzed, and some were neither coagulated nor hemolyzed. This shows that the influencing factor is not the strength of the spell and the material, but something else. This makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, the worst possible thing is to do a few more experiments to verify it. Archmage Grom nodded. Then, it proves that some blood can prevent hemolysis and coagulation, so what? With neither hemolysis nor coagulation, as long as they are of the same blood type, they can be transfused to each other. When the human body loses too much blood, the probability of a transfusion reaction will be much smaller if blood of the same blood type is transfused. The necromancers looked at each other. For people who have lost excessive blood, give him a blood transfusion to save his life. Of course the necromancers have tried it. They have made various attempts to transfuse cow blood, horse blood, sheep blood, human blood, etc. more than once. A small number of experiments using animal blood were successful for a short period of time, but most failed. A small number of experiments using human blood were successful, but most failed. The failure rate is too high, there is no advantage over treatment techniques, and there is no pattern of success at all. The Parliament's paper library, dozens or hundreds of papers describing the process of failure, is full of the bones of those who were affected by the spell. So, is the secret to successful blood transfusions the same blood type? Can I do some experimental verification for you? Among the dozen necromancers, the one who provided mosquitoes as casting materials and was changed into leeches by Gretel took a step forward and bowed slightly. Gretel answered without hesitation. Of course the experiment must be done. It must be done. What are you going to do? Find a group of people to conduct experiments according to your ideas and verify the success rate of blood transfusion. The necromancer blurted out the answer without thinking. What? Gretel was still startled even though he was mentally prepared. Do it directly with healthy living people? His voice became louder unknowingly, and he said, No. We gave the money. The necromancer who asked for help explained carefully. There are a group of living people kept captive in Black Crow Swamp at any time. If you want to get experimental materials or do experiments, just pull them over. Of course, it will not be in vain, you must pay the school. These living people are usually given money to collect materials. If they become sick, disabled, or die, they will also give pensions to their families. If you want to be a guinea pig in Black Crow Swamp, it doesn't matter. You can't wait to do it. Of course, if any archmage spoils the experimental products too much, there will suddenly not be enough experimental products, and there will be many poor people on the streets. Just throw out a handful of gold coins, and some will die, some will live. No, absolutely not. Gretel shook his head quickly. The necromancer's collective expressions dropped. It's not like they won't pay, the experimental subjects have signed life and death certificates, why can't they be used? This Nordmark mage has too much control. But there is no way. After listening to other people's lessons, using other people's experimental plans, and doing verification experiments for others, you must abide by other people's rules. Next to the requester, a younger necromancer raised his hand cautiously. Then, try giving me a blood transfusion. I volunteered. Dedicate yourself to research, don't be shabby. Well, before doing the experiment, I need to go next door to get some mages from the medical branch to come over. No, Gretel continued to shake his head. It's not a question of whether you are willing or not, it is not allowed to directly conduct experiments on healthy people. It is not in line with medical ethics. Where can one go to find someone who has lost so much blood that they might die and try to give them a blood transfusion? Gretel rubbed his forehead, then rubbed it again. Excessive blood loss and injuries. In this era, the group with the highest probability of encountering these things is, yes. He turned to Archmage Grom. Otherwise, you will take me to the temple of the god of war? Or to the army somewhere. I will find a group of people, check their blood types first, and then find an opportunity to give them blood transfusions. Then when will we go? The necromancers collectively wailed. The key is that their relationship with the god of war temple is not very good, so they cannot conduct experiments openly. Are you looking for an army? Recently, the area has been quite peaceful, and there have been no major conflicts between the lords. Counting on that bit of injury during training? The probability is too low. Then, try it with an animal. Cat, dog, pig, or horse. Gretel proposed another plan. The necromancers were shocked. What? Do animals also have different blood types? There should be. Gretel answered, completely lacking confidence. By the way, cats have different blood types, so do dogs, and many animals do, but how many blood types do these animals have, what proportions are there, and how many samples are needed to determine the different blood types? Greet had no idea. Hey, I think I heard a classmate complain before, saying that although cats only have 3 blood types, more than 95% of cats have the same blood type. In other words, if you catch 2 cats and transfuse blood randomly, there will basically be no problem. Then there is no experimental value. He himself has no confidence, and it is even less likely that others will agree. All the black-robed mages in the room shook their heads in unison. Their black robes fluttered and their thin, waxy heads shook. The scene looked very scary. Shaking and shaking, someone suddenly slapped his head. We can give blood transfusions to dead people. Yes, that's right. Give blood to the dead. I'll get the body. I'll get it too. My share of high-level corpses this year has not been used up yet. A group of magicians ran away. Gretel was confused. Wait, what the hell? What the hell is giving blood to a dead person? Your deceased family member needs a blood transfusion. No, your deceased family member still has blood in his veins. You don't know this, right? Archmage Grom said with a smile. Since Gretel entered the Tower of Sleeplessness, he has been delivering shock to others. It is rare that he can be shocked by others. The school of necromancy has always had a theory, that is, if the vitality of the blood can be maintained, it will be more conducive to controlling the corpse and even resurrecting the corpse. Therefore, many high-level corpses have flowing blood. Since you don't want to use living people, then let's try it with dead people. No, by the way, the blood types of the corpses you preserved can also be tested. Gretel continued to be confused. Soon, a large number of necromancers came back, dragging 1 to 2 corpses each, and rushed into the laboratory cheering. Gretel had to direct. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. First organize the experimental table, brush the test tubes, and label them. Don't be lazy and use the cleaning technique to brush the test tube. The cleaning technique can only be used for the first time, and you have to brush it manually after that. The standard is that the water on the inner wall of the test tube neither condenses into water droplets nor flows down in strands. Don't draw too much blood. 1 tube of 5 ml is enough. Only 1 or 2 drops of blood are needed for blood matching experiments. The centrifuge needs to be balanced. Balance it? It cannot be started without balance. Squeak. The shaft made an unpleasant noise. With quick eyesight and quick hands, Gretel repainted 2 defensive spells for himself and jumped behind Archmage Grom. Let's lament that the development of many medical research in the early years was thanks to the advantages of low human rights. Now, in order to verify that this kind of blood transfusion is okay, you would try to randomly recruit healthy people to give blood transfusions. Get rid of the head of the Medical Ethics Committee. I regularly ask for subscriptions, monthly tickets, recommendation votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. Thanks to @MagicalGirl Pika Meow for the 500 starting coins reward. Thanks to @Shukvan for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 490. Gretel was busy among the necromancers, pointing fingers and giving orders constantly. The serum is on top. The red blood cells are on the bottom. Don't suck the serum on top too. Don't be stingy with straws. Change them after you use them. Get another one. First extend the straw into the test tube diagonally, then straighten it, and then insert it into the depth of the test tube before dripping. Don't touch the wall of the tube. It will all be wasted. The temperature of the water bath is kept at 37 degrees, which is the same as the body temperature. If it is too cold, the red blood cells will condense. Well, this is the blood of a dead person, and 37 degrees is not necessarily correct. In this way, bring in more water baths and adjust the temperature a few more times. Temperature. It must be admitted that the magician's hands-on ability has surpassed that of a college student in his previous life, and is about the same as a master's student who has spent a year in the laboratory. And the necromancer's experimental level is the best among mages. According to public opinion in the industry, only mages from the alchemy branch of the School of Change can compete with them at the operational level. Even so, Gretel still has many places to guide himself. The devil is in the details. Even in the simplest cross-matching experiment, there are 7, 8, or a dozen details that need to be paid attention to. If it's even close, the result may not be achieved, or the result may be wrong. Gretel stepped on his left foot and his right foot, and finally waited until the necromancers finished centrifuging, diluting, and adding the red blood cell suspension into the serum. He finally rushed forward impatiently and grabbed a syringe. "Give it to me. Give it to me. While the mixture is about to incubate in the water bath, give me a tube first and let me take a look under the microscope. Blood that is darker than venous blood. Black, black, and red, that color has caught up with blood clots. Taken directly from the blood vessels of corpses. It can still flow. Woohoo, he must see for himself what the red blood cells of this blood look like under a microscope." Gretel held his breath, dripped blood, pushed the film, and stained it. Adjust the objective lens, adjust the eyepiece. Cannot see clearly. Well, a dye that can dye red blood cells cannot dye the dead blood extracted from corpses. Greet lowered his head in frustration and secretly decided to wait until today's experiment was completed and then check the paper to see if there was any experimental method for observing the morphology of red blood cells in corpses. On the right, a bottle of liquid has been handed over. "Do you want dye? Or should we dye it for you? There are techniques for dyeing the blood of undead creatures. You can't just drop the dye on it dash." Seeing Gretel's somewhat surprised look, the necromancer smiled and said, "Isn't it weird? It's been so long since you've built a microscope and seen all kinds of bacteria. Of course we'll use it to look around. That means staining is more troublesome. If you come a month later, you'll have to write a paper. Published." Now that the paper has been written, Greet will not bother with drawing, and just take a look at it to satisfy his curiosity. Well, many red blood cells are still in shape and not broken. Maybe a cross-matching test can be done. After all this fussing, the mixture was incubated in the water bath for enough time, and the results started to appear one after another. This group can't do it. They're all frozen. This group too. This group can't do it either. There's no coagulation. This group. A dozen necromancers tried 3 plans each and were completely wiped out. They showed no regrets at all, discussed with each other, and immediately started a new round of experiments. No need for anticoagulation spells. Anyway, all this blood has been processed. Adjust the temperature again. Adjust it a few more times until it reaches freezing point. Increase the proportion of negative energy. Half of the people go out and do experiments with fresh blood. First get 100 people to draw blood and compare them to see how many blood types there are. When the experiment progressed to this point, Gretel simply handed over the leadership and sat aside to watch the necromancers do it. After 2 days of hard work, the first cheers came from the fresh blood experiment side. It's done. It's done. There are 4. There are 4 different kinds of blood. Either they will clot with each other, or one tube will clot. The same kind of blood, neither tube will clot. You can write your paper now. Publish a big article. This time I must publish a big article. At least I can get a second work this time. Research points. Contribution points. Rewards within the school. I can finally be promoted to the 3rd level Arcanist. Try a blood transfusion. No, Mr. Nordmark won't allow blood transfusion, then mix a large amount of the same type of blood and see if it will clot. Greet leaned against the experimental table, watching the necromancers cheering, and unconsciously smiled. Even if he loses a little weight, his skin becomes a little sallower, and his temperament becomes a little gloomier, the necromancer is still a human being, not a skeleton. The look of being happy is quite contagious. Moreover, the necromancer celebrated with double excitement and double happiness. Living people are responsible for shouting, cheering and singing, and running around the field holding test tubes. The skeletons are responsible for waving their arms, jumping, somersaulting, handstands, picking off their own heads, and throwing them around each other. In addition to being unable to make any sound, it can be said to be an excellent atmosphere group. It is tireless and does not cry out in pain when it falls. It perfectly fills the gap of the necromancer's weak athletic ability. Gretel watched happily for a while, then withdrew his attention and began to study the blood in front of him. The previous round of troubles were all preparations. His real purpose was to develop blood testing magic. 100 samples, each 1 milliliter, are numbered. Someone has already divided them into 4 piles according to their blood types. Greet took a test tube, sucked a drop of blood, and released Distinguish Bloodline. After he returned this time, he browsed through Thunderhorn's database and found an advanced version. This time the spell was cast, the information fed back by the magic was a bit more than the original version. The owner of the blood is human, male. Power level, ordinary person. Gone. Gone. Strange. Why can even the race be identified, but the blood type cannot be identified? Gretel spread out his pen and paper and began to write and draw. Module A, Module B, Module C, Module D. When she went to the Dwarf Kingdom, Gretel had developed blood oxygen monitoring magic based on Distinguish Bloodline and had some experience in dismantling this magic. Now that I'm doing it, I'm very familiar with it. At that time, he discovered that after removing the magic feedback unit, he would get a lot of messy messages. The feedback unit, in a sense, sorts out these messages, extracts a few fixed ones, and interprets the meaning for the caster. For example, race, humans, elves, orcs, dwarves, mixed race. The spell information Gretel read pointed out that it can also identify certain monsters and even dragons. Gender, male, female, other races may have different genders. Power level, civilian, and then from level 1 to level 10 or above, it seems that it can be interpreted. It's amazing that this spell can actually roughly distinguish whether it is a warrior or a spellcaster. There must be more messy information that it can't decipher, buried in the feedback. And among these pieces of information, maybe one of them is about blood type. In other words, I only need to find the point in all the information where the same blood type is exactly the same and the 4 blood types are different. The best thing is the section at the same position in the information flow. Then, all the work begins with recording information. Greet waved his fist to encourage himself and started to draw hard. 100 blood samples means 100 pieces of messy information, which should be recorded as accurately as possible. The more accurate the recording, the easier it is to compare, and the greater the possibility of finding the one he wants. Come on, Greed. He immersed himself in it. Endless ink pen flies up and down, dotted with stars, leaving messy ink dots, circles, arcs and various strips on the paper. Large and small, thick and thin, they look like urchins' graffiti. But of course, no one dares to take these smudges lightly. The necromancer who was watching saw him writing and drawing, and even took a long detour without even placing the skeleton there. Gretel was immersed in recording, not knowing what night it was. After a long time, he heard someone next to him shouting, "Mage Nordmark! Mage Nordmark!" Gretel. Greet was startled and came back to his senses. Next to him, Archmage Grom seemed a little drier, with a layer of red light covering his dry and yellow face, and his tone was excited. The little guys did it. They successfully tested the blood type of the corpse. Oh. Greet blinked and smiled in line with the Archmage's expectations. So what? So what? This kind of corpse has been dead for 10 or 8 years, but the blood can still flow. What if the blood type is tested? I'm a doctor. I don't want to change my career as a forensic scientist. After testing the blood type, they transfused blood with the corresponding blood type into the corpse, and the blood did not coagulate. Moreover, the vitality of the corpse has indeed improved. Archmage Grom was beyond excited. The preservation of corpses and the maintenance of their vitality have always been key issues for the necromancy school. Everyone has tried transfusing living blood into corpses before, and most of it has coagulated. But now, Greet's discovery has solved this problem. Don't worry, this paper will be published in your name, and you have the final say as to who will be the second author. All the results belong to you. Archmage Grom took over everything. In addition, in order to thank Greet, he also prepared an extra note. I contacted the Temple of the God of War, the city guards, the Parliament law enforcement team, and several surrounding armies. They all said that there have been no military operations recently, and the occasional training injury can be fully dealt with by the daily treatment force. But before Greet could ask, his voice suddenly rose. I thought of a place that definitely needs blood transfusion. Where? Mothers. When giving birth, you will definitely lose a lot of blood. We only need to pick up the pregnant women in the workhouse and those receiving relief in advance, and give them blood transfusions when they give birth to their children, so that we can verify the theory of blood types. That's right. Gretel's eyes lit up. Seeing that he agreed, the Archmage slapped his chest even more. If you agree, I will apply for the project now. Don't worry, the cost of supporting those pregnant women will be charged to Black Crow Swamp and not your money. 3,000 words. Another update completed. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. By the way, I am thinking about a question: do races without reproductive isolation, such as elves, humans, and orcs, have the same blood types? Thanks to @LauHazeLauMo for the reward of 200 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 491. Give blood transfusions to pregnant women? Greet blinked, feeling that this was really possible. Many pregnant women really need blood transfusions, and they, or their families, really cannot afford the cost of magical treatment. When there is a real need, in the name of mutual medical assistance, the mother's family organizes manpower to prepare blood supply, and the Parliament, or Black Crow Swamp, provides technology, funds, and even a secret treatment magic, which can be regarded as a reasonable way to carry out clinical research. Only. Gretel turned to the Archmage with hope. Are you willing to let me go back to the medical center? Well. The Archmage choked. The reason why Gretel was brought to the Tower of Sleeplessness was that there are suspicious activities outside, and Gretel needs to stay in a safer place now that the suspect has not been arrested. He will be put back to the hospital immediately. That master who can break through the ice wall could probably kill Gretel if he really got up close. Only 1,000 days to be a thief, not 1,000 days to guard against thieves? Archmage Grom hesitated and proposed a plan that he had thought about for a long time. Gretel, how about we fish him out? How to fish? Greet had no idea. The spy last time, the assassin who was said to be a level 7, yes, the one he dissected himself, was not fished out by him. Gretel still doesn't understand what made the assassin so crazy that he wanted to get into his bacteria laboratory. He only understands one thing. You can't use my hospital as bait. Doctors, nurses, and patients will all be hurt. Definitely not setting up an ambush in the hospital. His Excellency the Archmage gave him a roll of his eyes. After the smashing incident that day, he personally went in and walked around. In his opinion, the hospital's defense facilities were no better than nothing. Can these things be used? A professional level 4 or above cannot take a photo, so it can barely be regarded as an early warning facility. It still needs to be watched by people, and it also needs to be coordinated with manual spellcasting. An ice wall trap, unless it was a special situation that day, it's hard to say whether it can cover people. A few magic circles are used to maintain order, but they are powerful enough to block a level 5 knight. The Archmage would say that the entire hospital's defense facilities combined are not as powerful as Gretel's Silver Moon Deer. Otherwise, let's find a lively place and let you go there for several days in a row. If that master is here for you and you go there for a few days in a row, he will definitely find a way to seize the opportunity. Will the lively event harm innocent people? Greet hesitated. Your Excellency the Archmage was well prepared for this question and waved his hand in a big way. Don't worry about this. It's definitely not the kind of place where there are a lot of civilians. Going to that kind of place is not in line with your identity, and no one who cares will believe it. Let's find a place with a lot of rich people and a low density of people. The occasion when Archmage Grom found it was the Triennial Fair in Neva City. This expo is hosted by the Magic Council and co-organized by nobles from various territories and wealthy businessmen. The main purpose is to display specialties from various places and new products from the Magic Council to facilitate transactions. So it's the World's Fair? Gretel secretly asked. He took the pamphlet handed over by the Archmage and quickly flipped through it, discovering that this expo was somewhat similar to the World Expo. However, the fair in Neva City is not open to the public for the first half of the month. In addition to exhibitors, only those whose assets reach a certain scale can get invitation letters. Of course, if the magician wants to get the invitation, he can do it anytime. This determines that the flow of people at the expo will not be too much anyway. In this case, even if the guy with ulterior motives is fished out, the pressure on security work will not be great. And it looks like there are a lot of interesting things. Greet murmured. At the exposition, there are all kinds of strange things found by navigators, naturalists, ship owners, and naval fleets returning from the New World. Animals, plants, minerals, gems, bones. If you go shopping around a bit, you might be able to find something useful. Moreover, can you go shopping with Sarah? After being dragged to the Mage Tower for several days without seeing her, Miss Silverdragon wouldn't have run out of patience, right? 5 days later, on the day of the opening ceremony, Greet came to the exhibition site with Sarah and Bernard riding the Silver Moon Deer. When she came to the door, Sarah said softly, "Wow! So big." The fair is not held in the center of the city, but rather on the edge of the city, extending almost to Wheaton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry on the other side. The Conjuration magician summoned earth elements to level the land, The transformation magician summoned golems to build a framework, and the servants of the god of nature spawned plants, which grew lushly into the walls of the venue. Sarah casually cast an eagle eye spell, and the magic looked down from top to bottom. The structure of the venue reflected on the light screen looked like a green flower. The 5 independent venues are like 5 petals, stretching in all directions. The Industrial Hall, Agricultural Hall, Museum, Art Hall, and Magic Hall each occupy one area. A circular walkway connects the center of the petals, with many white umbrella canopies dotted in the center. Obviously, the dining area and banquet area are arranged in the center, making it easier for everyone to walk around and have something to eat after viewing an exhibition hall. On both sides of the opening ceremony venue, 2 flagpoles stood on each side, with the flags representing the participating countries flying high. The Kingdom of Kent, where the Parliament is located, the Kingdom of the Dwarves, the Kingdom of the Barbarians, if the tribal alliance of the Barbarians can be considered a country, and the Kingdom of the Orcs from afar. Of course, Gretel secretly suspected that the people from the Orc Kingdom were not participating in the exhibition in the name of the country. But there happened to be a group of businessmen doing business here, so they squeezed in under the banner of the kingdom. As soon as the opening ceremony ended, Sarah pulled Gretel and squeezed in eagerly. Almost immediately, Miss Yinlong, who had not been influenced by industrial society, was dazzled by what she saw. Wow! A 2-story pipe organ. Greet, can I play it? Don't break someone else's piano. The sound of the organ is very magnificent. If we don't play well, the entire exhibition hall will look down upon us. Wow! Such a big mirror on one wall. Ha 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 ha, there are all kinds of curved mirrors next to it. Greet, look, I'm fat. I'm thin again. I'm fat again. I'm thin again. I'm so short again. It's just a fun mirror, let's go. If you want, I'll go back and place an order to customize a bunch of them for you to take your time at home. Well, you can't pay for it, but you don't have to pay for it. If Sarah really wanted it, she could get rid of the glucose-silver mirror reaction later, and she should be able to replace countless mirrors. Wow! A 3-story crystal fountain. It's all made of crystal. It's sparkling. I really want to move it back. This should be crystal glass. Gretel sighed. Even so, the crystal glass is so transparent and clear, and the craftsmanship in making the crystal glass is also very strong. Swarovski. In my impression, they are also very good at making optical glass. Maybe I can place some orders later. Wow! This chandelier must have thousands of crystals, it's so beautiful when lit up, so beautiful, it looks like countless rainbow-colored stars. I really want to hang one like this at home. It must be very, very beautiful. Sarah raised her head and stared at the crystal lamp above her head, unable to walk at all. Silver Dragon has never been able to resist beautiful things and sparkling things. What's more, this crystal lamp is so beautiful and sparkling that it completely touches her cuteness. Greet wanted to drag her but couldn't. He wanted to persuade her to go see the next exhibit, but Miss Silver Dragon didn't seem to hear her at all. Seeing that fewer and fewer people were looking at the crystal lanterns and more people were looking at Miss Elf, he had no choice but to whisper. I have a small one in my villa. If you want, you can take it down. The Industrial Products Exhibition Hall is about 200 meters long and about 100 meters wide, surrounded by side corridors about 10 meters wide and with 2 floors. The exhibits in the exhibition hall are divided into machinery, instruments, chemicals, textiles, metals, glass, musical instruments, and many other items, with more than thousands of items. Sarah couldn't help but wander around for a whole day. Especially those glassware, precious metals, and gemstones, I can't wait to touch them one by one. Greet has been baptized by modern industry and is not likely to be shocked, but he also finds this exhibition quite interesting. In particular, those gold clocks that are as tall as one person. crystal candlesticks that are 2 people tall, and exquisite tapestries that can cover a whole wall. It fully embodies the aesthetic views of big is beautiful, expensive is beautiful, and gold and precious stones are piled up to be beautiful. It's simple and crude, but I have to say that this kind of beauty really touches one's heart. After wandering around in a daze for a day, they set off on time the next day, riding silver moon deers through the market and entering the agricultural museum. Most of the exhibitors here are from the surrounding farms, as well as lords from various places further away. Which village has particularly good tasting cheese, which farm has particularly large milk producing cows, which produces pumpkins as tall as half a person. There was even a side room that was full of wine and crowded. Gretel went in and inquired about it, only to find out that a federation composed of hundreds of wineries from all over the kingdom, and even mainland nobles from across the sea, was evaluating the wines. Judging from their tone, it seems that they intend to evaluate a group of top wineries, first class, second class and third class wineries. From now on, the pricing of wine will be based on the grade. Gretel is grateful for the wine tasting. As for the 2 companions, Bernard only knows how to drink, and Cyrillamus Silver Dragon drinks too much. God knows what will happen. Greet dragged them hard, managed to leave the agriculture hall, and got into the museum hall next door. After passing 2 booths, I saw a large group of people crowded not far away, shouting, "Mr. Otto, come and see what this is. Don't mess around, let Mr. Otto identify it. He is a famous naturalist. Is there something new you don't recognize?" Gretel became curious and approached cautiously. Across the booth, the naturalist with slightly freckles on his temples and thin lips raised his head and met his gaze, his thin eyes shining with light. "Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of